Hello, I'm Michael Verney and welcome to the Irish Independent's GAA Championship Preview video. I'd like to be joined by Conor McKeon. How are you doing, Conor?
All right, Mike.
We have 4 juicy quarterfinals to look forward to this weekend. Obviously, we only have 3 big weekends of football to come, but this is one to really get your teeth stuck into.
It is. I can't remember the last time there was that much of a buzz around quarterfinal weekend. I think 2010 was the last real memorable quarterfinal weekend I can remember, when Down beat Kerry unexpectedly and Dublin beat Tyrone unexpectedly, and Kildare beat Meath. Generally, quarterfinal weekend, there's always a couple of duds, big hammerings and that sort of thing. But even going through them just for a piece for the paper earlier in the week, it's they're 4 juicy fixtures. And between the kind of general leveling off and standards and the fact that we're getting so many really entertaining football games, I can't remember being quite as looking forward to a weekend, a quarter-final like this before.
There's no real appetizers because they're nearly all main courses, but the main course of all main courses is probably Kerry and Armagh, a repeat of last year's semi-final as well. Kerry obviously stuttering a small bit. That result obviously against Meath kind of affected them, and they didn't get their 2 weeks break, and they're having to play a couple of weekends in a row now, and some injuries to high-profile players. Whereas Armagh has been going unbelievably well, and their graph has been trending higher and higher. Most of their big players are fit. It nearly points to Armagh, but it's nearly too easy there, too kind of sensible to look at it in that way, because there has to be a big response from Kerry.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that Meath game is going to be worth in the ultimate analysis of Kerry's year. They were already home and hosed. I know they ended up playing an extra game, but I'm not sure that was the great drain on their time and resources that it might have been made out to be. Last year they beat them, Armagh only beat them after extra time, and they held David Clifford to a point from play. They're not going to hold him to a point from play on Sunday. That's my big prediction for the weekend. But they Barry McCambridge marked him last year. Barry McCambridge seems to be injured, so it'll be interesting to see how they do. The rules have made it different for David Clifford. He does have more space now. He doesn't have to track back as much. There's only so much of putting him on the back foot that you can actually do. So I mean, he was almost supernaturally good against Cavan the last day. Niall Carlin, who was marking him, was brilliant on Ryan O'Donoghue in Cavan's big win over Mayo. And, I mean, he just brushed them aside. So, I mean, he scored 2 hat-tricks this year. I can't ever remember that doing. So, I don't think it's fair on Armagh to boil it down to the Clifford equation if they hold them. If they don't, they might have enough firepower besides, but it is going to be seriously big factor,
The first game that day is Meath against Galway. I don't know, Meath have beaten Dublin and Kerry already this year, and they're underdogs, and I think they're outsiders of the 8. They're probably not getting the credit they deserve, realistically.
No, I mean, if you told them at the start of the year to beat Dublin and Kerry in the championship, you would have said it was and beat them both well. I think they're 13-5 for this game, which is a huge price. But Galway just very, very good at figuring stuff out. I mean, that match against Down at the weekend, I gave Down a right squeak because they're a good team and they're at home and they've a lot of scorers. And Galway have learned how to figure things out, and they're not as reliant on Comer and Walsh anymore. For as brilliant as Walsh was 15 minutes before half-time against Down, when he went off then, Matthew Thompson was absolutely... What a brilliant game he had. They've Rob Finnerty, who I think is the second highest or third highest scorer in the championship this year, behind Clifford and Samuel Roy. So they have more besides, and even Tom O'Culhan coming off the bench and getting a goal. So I think Matthew Tierney has 5 goals scored as well in the championship this year. So they have scores from elsewhere. That's the point. I think if they have the 2 boys, they nearly go over the top. But even without them, I still think they're just more experienced and campaigners. But Meath were brilliant on both kickouts against Kerry, and they're going to have to go after that as well. Conor Flaherty had a few. I think he lost 8 out of 10 just after half-time against Down. And I think Meath are still, I'm open to correction, but I think they're still the team that have scored the highest number of 2-pointers. So,
ridiculous amount,
So there's the 2 areas that they're really strong in, and I think they would have to have a particularly strong performance in both of those metrics on Sunday to beat Galway.
Talk of Matthew Costello have been back as well, and even the Leinster final, it wasn't as if they didn't show up. They were the best team for about 35 or 40 minutes, and that whole Croke Park experience might kind of benefit them as well when it comes to this game.
Yeah, it's I can see them really going, and there's a freshness about them as well. They're new to this kind of level, and in some ways that can be a good thing. You're not quite, you're not going up there with any sort of burdens or issues on your shoulders. There's a freshness about them, and they've a lot of pace, and they kick the ball very well, and they're very good off both kickouts. And like at a stage in the game's development now where we're not quite sure like what the best way to play the game is. They've figured out some of the very basics really well, really quickly under the new management, which is some going considering the two coaches, the selectors, Corey and John McMahon, left them at the end of the league. Like it's, you know, they've had a sort of, like they're not even one of the biggest talking points about the year, but they have had an amazing year to this point.
Well, everything would have suggested that the arse, pardon my pun, would fall out of it when that happened, and it's gone the other way completely. It's been amazing. That's probably going to be a sellout on Sunday. Probably going to be a sellout on Saturday as well. The first game we have to talk about is Monaghan and Donegal. So Donegal were the last team to play last weekend, threw in a 4:00 in Ballybuffet, and they're the first team to play this weekend. And to say that it has rankled a lot of people up in Donegal, this 6-day turnaround, is a gross understatement.
Yeah, and particularly when you think about, like, Jim McGuinness was so peeved about the venue choice for the Mayo game, the fact that they had to go to Dr. Hyde Park. You know, I think part of that, not that he wasn't being genuine about it, but I think part of it was, you know, in a situation where we might get the rub of the green from the CCC in future, we definitely will now.
Yeah.
And I suppose, like, there's a couple of elements to take into that decision. First of all, there's the commercial element, which is, you know, all things being fair, you would have put Galway and you would have put Donegal on Sunday. But in that situation, you probably wouldn't sell out Sunday, whereas Saturday, you could sell it out nearly twice. So
what do you make of that now?
I mean, you're damned if you do and if you're damned if you don't. But there wasn't too many people that were expecting the Dublin Tyrone game and the Kerry Armagh game to be on the same day.
Yeah. And
then the other decision then, when it came down to separating them, you know, to take the commercial decision, is which do you put on the Saturday? Do you inflict the 6-day turnaround on Galway, or do you do it to Donegal? And I suppose the argument there is that Galway had to go to Newry and had to travel back from Newry last Sunday, whereas Donegal were at home in Ballybuffet.
What did you make of Pádraig Joyce's little kind of not so veiled dig at his former college mate Jim McGuinness as well, saying we won't complain about, I think it's the guts of 2,000 kilometres will be travelled in the last month or so?
Yeah, well, in fairness to Joyce, he's one of the few GAA managers that literally says the first thing that comes into his head, and it's great, it's very refreshing. Like, I wasn't there, but Colin Keys tells me somebody brought up the quality of Shane Walsh's performance, you know, as a little feeder question, and the first thing Joyce said was, took him a while to get into it, you know, so he'll never just go for the consensus. He'll always kind of challenge it. So, and look, to be fair, that has been his whole approach to everything so far, you know. Like we are what we do, you know, like if we're in a situation that we're put in because we didn't top the group, well then that's on us. So but they will get an advantage out of it, like 6-day turnaround versus 7, an extra night's sleep, all that sort of stuff. You know, I was just reading Ger Brennan's quotes after the Louth defeat to Donegal, and he was talking about what he called their repeat sprintability, which is the guys just running flat out, recovering quickly and going again. And that's obviously as a result of their conditioning. But 3 games in 3 weeks and 6 days after the last one, that's going to test. The kind of energy levels, because they obviously are such a high tempo team. So much of their energy comes from those players that are coming from the back. Like Monaghan, probably the least talked about team going into this weekend.
It's funny, Monaghan and Meath have both secured like automatic quarter-final berths.
And like Monaghan had 5 weeks off after they went out of Ulster, and then they breezed through the easiest group. So they're the freshest team here. They're the team that has, so far as we know anyway, the most healthy squad. They've no apparent injuries, and like their scoring rate in the group against good teams was exceptionally good, and they're spreading the scoring around. Like they get a bit like Donegal. They get a lot of their scores from defenders breaking from the half back line and stuff like that. So that's going to be a serious game. Game.
You mentioned Ger Brennan there. Croke Park is a very easy place to find. But there must be bus drivers and logistics managers on high alert now. Like, it's crazy that Louth ended up where they did. They stayed at Enniskillen and ended up in Sligo, had to travel about 2 hours and 10 minutes back up to Ballybuffet. Didn't get 15 minutes grace that you would expect them to get, but it's one of the mad stories of the year. Only a week after Waterford's bus not showing up for the All-Ireland Minor semi-final.
Yeah, it is a mad one. No, I've heard of some mad things happening. I remember Dublin played a league match in Newry a few years ago, and they were told that there was no room for the bus inside Park Esler, and they had to park it down one of the side streets. But the match parking, so they were parking 5,000 cars down the road. So they were all, by the time I was leaving the ground an hour after the match, all the lads were sitting by the side of the road with their gear bags over their shoulder waiting for the traffic to clear. So mad things do occasionally happen, but getting lost on the way to the match now, like you don't even hear of supporters doing that anymore, let alone the team bus.
John Milan tells a good one about when Waterford went up to Croke Park and their bus was too high. It got stuck stuck underneath the Hogan stand or the Cusack stand, and they had to walk the whole way around or whatever. But the other game on Saturday evening then, Tyrone and Dublin, a lot will depend on Conor Callaghan's fitness. He didn't play last weekend, which was a big risk because they just got over the line. Do you see him featuring at the weekend? They were warming him up, I believe, at certain stages against Cork.
Like Daisy said after Daisy Farrell said after the Cork game that he basically intimated that Dublin took a chance, that they could have pushed him into service, and they were warming him up at the end. But obviously, he played longer against Derry, I think, than they would have liked. He got through 75 minutes, scored 5 points from play, but wasn't moving the way he would normally move. So if it is a hamstring, you would imagine 2 weeks rest will do him the world of good. But you're right, like against Derry, Dublin had far more purpose than attack. When the ball goes through Con, he's so decisive. Whereas they're just a little bit slower and more ponderous in that kind of attack phase, particularly that, not necessarily when they turn the team over and move quickly on the break, but when this phase of play that happens a million times in every game, where the opposition sets up around the 2-point arc and you're kind of trying to set up one-on-ones and sort of break in at angles and stuff like that. He's so decisive. It's almost like Dublin get to the shot far quicker when Connor's there on the pitch, even if he's not the one taking it. So no, he's huge for them. I can't remember the last time Dublin felt so reliant on one player. They are a good team without him, but I think they could be an excellent team with him. And that could be the difference this weekend. Yeah,
with what they've lost in the off-season, you just can't afford to be missing someone like that. And he just dictates and controls. And I'd imagine lads feel a bit like a foot taller when he's on the pitch as well.
Because they've managed to kind of correct some of the weaknesses maybe they had. Like against Meath, they were savage on their kick-out. I would say, without having the stats in front of me, that Dublin have retained more of their kick-outs since then than any other team. They've found a midfield, like after losing Brian Fenton and James McCarthy, maybe the greatest midfield ever, they have now found a decent midfield in Killian McGuinness and Patrick Cuffy-Bourne. They've worked on that non-stop, and they've simplified their kickouts. If you look at Dublin, Galway would be a team who kind of overload one side with big men and go to it, whereas Dublin actually spread out when they don't get a quick one away, and then Gluckson just picks whichever matchup he thinks they have the best. So it could be O'Cuffy-Bourne, it could be Brian Howard, it might be Kieran Kilkenny. It's very simple. There's nothing particularly complex about it, but it's just quick decision making and good execution. So they have been really good on their own kick out since then, but the Con thing is just huge. They're a serious attacking force when he's there, and they're just not quite as I don't know, it's almost like they're not quite as focused when he's not there, because he's a great man to give the ball to the person in the right position. There's no sense of being a glory hunter out of him either. He makes the whole attack tick an awful lot better when he's there. In the Tyrone attack, obviously, of Derek Hannivan and Darren McCurry's probably playing the football of his life as well. They're coming into this kind of nicely too, aren't they? Yeah, in the league match between the two teams in March, Tyrone won that by 10 points, but they got relegated. But there was a kind of a good vibe around the Tyrone dressing room, because they'd finished the league very well and they were showing good form. And McCurry was just exceptional that day. Remember, he played an incredible ball. He lost Davy Bourne, and he played a brilliant ball into the back post. Yeah. But Canavan has, I think, we had a couple of knocks, and he hasn't had quite as hectic a summer now. He got 5 points, I think, against Cavan in their last game. So, I mean, this is his stage, this is where Tyrone wanted to be. They're a team with loads of pace and energy and move the ball well, and they've good inside forward. So, I mean, the cliche is that should be maximised in Croke Park. So, I mean, that'll be another belter as well. Call your 4 semi-finalists. Galway, Armagh, Donegal and Dublin. Lovely. Okay. There's an All-Ireland final this weekend as well. The All-Ireland Minor Hurling final is taking place in Semple Stadium on Saturday evening. Where do you fall on these games not being played before big senior games anymore? I just think with the exposure that they get on TG Carter, and everyone, the whole nation can see these games now.
I think we're being overprotective of young players, and I think it's a great learning curve for them. They're not thrown to the wolves or anything like that. I think it's great, and some lads would grow a foot in that kind of instance. Where do you fall in that? I know I was chatting to Waterford manager James O'Connor, and he just said he played in the '92 final and before 65,000, and he loved it.
Yeah.
Where do you fall in that?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't see what's so kind of potentially damaging about exposing under 17s to that kind of environment. That under 18s are far better suited to it. Now, maybe they would have taken the under 18s out of it had they kept the age group at that level. But I've never heard a player who played in an All-Ireland minor final regret it or give out about it or say, I wish that game had been played somewhere else. I felt too exposed or too deeply scrutinised or whatever. They've come in one school finals going on in Croke Park, and I know it's not the same atmosphere. But
even halftime games with primary school kids as well.
You know, it's not as if when the minor final is on, Croke Park has 83,000 people in it and everybody's roaring and shouting at it. You know yourself, there's a kind of a half focus on it and people kind of tune in, particularly if one of the competing counties is in the senior final as well. But besides anything else, they add an awful lot to All-Ireland final day, and there's an awful lot has been lost from the days themselves. They're brilliant Irish cultural occasions in as much as they are sporting occasions, and we've lost a lot of that because of the timing of it. That's a necessary evil, that's fine, but we've taken an awful lot more of it. Because you know yourself, All-Ireland final days, you know, in my head, I'm always getting to Croke Park at sort of 3 hours before throw-in. Whereas now, there's nobody in the ground 40 minutes before throw-in. So there's no great carnival atmosphere. But they are incredible occasions. And I think the minor finals being on the same ticket only add to that. I don't see the value in having them somewhere else because they don't feel like the same. They don't feel like the same occasion anymore for the minor and for the senior.
Yeah, if you're listening, we need to go back to the future. Minor finals before senior finals. Conor, thanks a million for your time. And we'll be back again next week with another championship preview video.